Okay, year five. So we're getting to the end of our project now, and really, last week we looked at the dot game, and in the last week's lesson um, we looked at basically the stars and how you make them collectible. We looked at the stars. We looked at the exit portal and how that was going to work to get between the levels, and we looked at the variables for the score and stuff for the stars variable. Okay, so basically now it's about adding extra things to your game to make it more fun to play, maybe more challenging in the levels, and so on and so forth. So it's about adding stuff in now, really, to make it more interesting for the player. So you can add things to your game, like I added boosters to the other game. You can add more things to collect, or maybe things to go in touch to do things, and that sort of thing as well. Okay, so I was just thinking about adding something that you have to go and touch to then be able to get through the maze of the game. So what I decided to do was use the ability to shrink as part of the game. So what I did was I purposely created a backdrop and a level where it's difficult for the dot character to fit through the maze at the size that the character is. So I decided to make a shrinking tool that you have to go and touch to make the character shrink to be able to fit through the level. So what I did was first of all I created this level by drawing it with the pen. I'm going to just move that up there for a second, and that will become obvious what the shrink timer is for in a bit. And then I created I created a sprite first of all, and then I duplicated it once I'd worked out the code. But I've got these shrinking sprites, and there are two of them, and I think I might need a third one, and we'll talk about that in a bit. And the idea is that when Dot plays the game, it needs to touch the shrink sprite to get small enough to fit through the gaps in the level. So it's just an idea really of what sorts of things we could do. Let's have a look and think about that for a second. So let's look at the shrink sprite that I set up. So if I turn it on, you can see that it appears on the stage. And I've got two of them in two different locations. So that one is over here, and that one is over here. Okay, and if we look at the code of this, I don't want them to appear until the backdrop number is equal to 3. So at the moment the backdrop number is equal to 3, so I want them to appear at that level, but not until that level. So if we have a quick look at this code that I put on here, it says when the green flag clicked, that resets the game, doesn't it? I want them to hide. I don't want them on the other levels. I only want them to appear on level 3, so I want them to hide, and then I'm going to get them to wait until. So this bit of code will sit there and run, but waiting until the backdrop, okay, equals 3. And so that's waits until the condition. Here we call this the condition becomes true. Okay, and at the moment this is true, so they should show up. So when I click the green flag, they should show up. Now, obviously it's resetting back to level 1, isn't it? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to dots for testing purposes, go to dots code, and I'm going to set it to level 3. So when I press the green flag, they now show up. Okay, they now show up. Good. Now, I've got two of them so far. They don't really do anything apart from show up at the right time, and I might need a third one as well, but we'll see how we go. So they need to just make sure they're there, but they need to show up at the right time, or show at the right time. All the code that makes these work is actually on dot. And it's a bit of extra code that I put in here. So I've created a few extra things in Dot's code. first of all, let's look at Dot's main code. Okay, so I've created something called a shrink timer, which is a variable. So I created a new variable called shrink timer. I also added this block here which says set size to 50%, and that's going to reset Dot to 50% at the very start when the green flag is clicked. At the moment I've switched it to level 3 for testing. Okay, so that's some of the changes I've made to the main code. Okay, then the rest of it's pretty much the same, apart from I've created some new code to control these shrink tools. Okay, so first of all, I've made a new procedure called touching shrink tool, and at the moment it says if you touch the shrink tool, okay, or shrink tool 2, because at the moment I've got 2 of them, and I might need to have 3 of them, but we'll see in a minute. So touching either this one or this one, then we're going to get it to change size by -40. Okay, so it's going to get quite small. Actually, I've decided that maybe that's a bit too small, but well, we'll try it and see. -40. Then I've set up a timer, the shrink timer, which is what I said earlier. So I created a variable called a shrink timer, and it's a bit like in Minecraft, you know, when you have a potion and there's a timer runs in the potion for how long it lasts, and so it's kind of similar to that. So I've made the shrink timer, okay, and I've told it that it's going to repeat 10, and every time it repeats this loop it will going to take 1 off the shrink timer, and it's going to wait 1 second to do that. So it should have 10 seconds of shrinking, of being shrunk. And then I've told it to set the size back to 50 after that, and then set the shrink timer, reset the shrink timer back to 10, okay, for the next time it's used. Now, I was also thinking about hiding and showing the shrink timer. We can use that as well, so I could make it so it hides the shrink timer when it's not in use, and make it so that it shows the shrink timer when it is in use. And we'll probably need to put the show somewhere up here, maybe put that there, see what happens. Okay, so this is going to do our shrink timer. Okay, the other thing I found as well was that I needed to create a new forever loop for this tool outside of the main code forever loop. So outside of this one up here, outside of that one, I had to create a new one. And the reason I had to do that was because otherwise Dot would touch the shrink tool and then get stuck there and wouldn't go any further. Okay, but we need the move to be happening all the time as well. So I separated this shrink tool out into its own forever loop. So if you run the code now, we should see that Dot gets smaller and can go through the shrink timer, and the shrink timer is currently counting down until I get big again. So I might be able to get that star, and then it's going to get, I'm going to get big again. Then it's going to shrink again, and the timer disappears. So I'm hopefully might be able to get through that gap first before getting big again. I'm going to move away. There we go. Okay. Now I've just realised that I can't get through the last gap without having another shrink tool. So I'm going to need to position another shrink tool around here somewhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate one of these shrink tools, and we're going to end up with shrink tool number 3, which is this one here. I'm going to put it down here because it's not in the right place. I'm going to put it down there like that. But the code's not going to work because the shrink tool is now called tool number 3. Yeah, so it's tool number 3. So I'm going to have to tell the Dot's code, we're going to have to modify this bit of code up here. So we're going to have to add an extra OR in here. So I'm going to pull this one out of here. I'm going to go to the operators and get another OR and stick it inside there. So I'm going to put that one in there, and I'm going to duplicate that. I'm going to put that one in there. and this will become shrink tool number 3. So now, if we restart the level, hopefully, shrink timer pops up. Might be able to get through that part of the gap before I get big again. So get big again, touch that shrink tool, try and get through this gap, pick up a star if I can, try and get through this gap whilst I'm small, and make sure I'm out of the way before I grow big again, and then can fit through that gap just, and then I'm going to go down to here, and it's going to shrink me again for another 10 seconds, and I've got to try and fit through that gap there without touching the wall. So that there we go. Okay, good. So that's really kind of how the shrink tool works, and it's just an idea of something you could create. It doesn't have to be shrinking, it could be something different, but it gives you an idea of something extra that you can put into your code. So so really your challenge now is to take the game and add those extra things to it to make it more fun to play. Maybe those level ups and shrink tools and booster tools and so on and so forth. If you remember the booster tool, I'll just show you quickly. The booster tool that we put into this game here, I'll just bring this one in. The booster tool that we had in this one, if you remember, was this booster block here, which appeared in all different random places. They weren't fixed like the shrink tools, they just appeared in random places, and I used the code for the crystals to create the code for the booster tool a little bit to make them appear. And if we look at Gobo's code, it's the this bit of code here that's making the booster work. So if you're touching the booster, then it's going to move 5 steps, else it's just going to go back to doing the moving again. And this one we put the moving, yeah, we just did do the moving, and I think if I remember we put the moving in a separate bit of code. Let me just see if I can find that. So maybe it's because I put it into this else do moving. Yeah, check for booster, and I moved the do moving into that bit of code there. But anyway, you can have an experiment and see what you can get working. And it's really just a case of you playing around with your code, adding extra things to it. And this is the last week of this, so so when you finish your game, it'd be great if you could post either the link to your game by clicking the share button up at the top. So click the shared button to make it shareable, which is what I've done with Dot's game here. Let's move this one back out of the way again. So I made Dot's game is shared. I clicked on the shared button and made Dot's game shared, and I posted the link to it. Once you've shared your project, let's go back to my folder here. Once you've shared a project, you need to make sure that you've verified your account first under the account settings and make sure your account's verified. But once you've shared your project, you can get the shareable link by clicking the copy link down here. When you click the copy link, okay, it's going to give you the link to the code, and you can copy that link and then you can post that onto the Google Classroom. Okay, so you can create a new Google Classroom post and paste that link into it, and it will work that way as well. If you haven't got a Scratch account, you'll need to download the game and post the file up there. So I'll show you what I mean. So it's creating a new one, but if I go to File and then Save to your computer, you can it will save the file to your computer, and you can post the file that it saves to your computer onto Google Classroom, and that'll be your finished project. So that would be great for you to be able to do that, and then you can post it onto the stream onto here, post it onto the stream onto here so we can see it. Yeah, okay, right, so keep working on your game, adding some extra bits to it, and I'll see them hopefully at the end of the week. Okay, bye for now.